So yesterday we had received some news from Game Informer that had stated that they have Spider-Man on their cover for May that will be releasing tomorrow with a lot of information regarding Spider-Man. They cover stuff throughout the month, but they have the main article up on their magazine for the month. Now on top of that, they said we also have the release date and we will tell you that tomorrow as well when the cover comes out. So that tomorrow is today, and so there has been a lot of information released and seen in the trailers and in the gameplay video footage that we have seen. So we're going to cover all that is in the release date, the new stuff that came out, and some of the interesting elements that they're bringing to the Spider-Man franchise with some cool little things that might get you excited along the way that are not spoilers. I can tell you for a fact, while reading the article, Game Informer really did a good job about trying to get information from them, and they were very good as Isnomniac. The company Isnomniac was really good about saying, we can't tell you about that, or you're gonna have to wait till the game comes out to know about that, or we'll get into those kinds of things in a minute. I'll let you know where they kind of said, we're not going to talk about that at the moment, but we'll cover a lot of stuff. And so it needed its own video. Well, there's no way we could have covered this on the freeze frame rate newscast. There's no way. We had to do this as its own video. So we're going to cover first, we're going to cover the release information about the release date, what comes with the game and everything. And then we'll go into the actual stuff in the Game Informer article that I was able to break down for you guys. So that saves your time. If you'd like to read the article, pick up the Game Informer magazine, check it out. It is a really nice informed article. I did not cover everything in the article. I covered good elements in there that I thought people want to know about and enjoy, that might get them excited about the game, because it did get me more excited than I was about this game. So first of all, we're going to cover the release date information. So they came out with the release date. It's coming out September 7th. It'll come out this year, 2018, September 7th, and it's going to come out with a couple editions on the game specifically. So they have the original game that you can just buy by itself, the $60. You can buy a digital deluxe edition for $79.99 USD, and this includes the new story chapters that will be post-launch DLC. It is called Marvel's Spider-Man: The City That Never Sleeps. Basically, there will be 3 DLC packs that basically will have new missions, new villains, new characters, additional suits for Spider-Man, which that's one of the things we'll talk about later on this video, the suits. If you pre-order, you also will get a collectible pin, but that is only if you are living in the United States or Canada. You will get a limited edition pin if you pre-order the digital edition or this deluxe edition that they announced as well. So the deluxe edition is a whopping $149.99 USD. A lot of money. Holy cow. But it does include a lot of content. It includes all the content on the digital deluxe edition. And then it also adds a steelbook case featuring the white Spider-Man on it, and I'll put the images up of what those editions look like so you can see them for yourself. Then it also so it has the steelbook case, and that's for your game. It also has a mini art book by Titan Books, and then there's an what they call an awesome, but it does look super cool, a statue, a Spider-Man statue, but unfortunately, they can't show you all of the statue. They can only show you the top, and the rest is covered, and it has summer 2018 on it. And I have a feeling it's like that because they're going to show us a trailer at E3, and then we'll find out a little bit more about why is that covered and what the heck is that statue. They also showed off like the costumes, and they said they'll show the other 2 costumes off in the summer as well, but I have an idea what the costumes are because they do talk about it in the article, but I don't know if those are the specific costumes that are not shown. So it's super cool. We'll look more about it later, but they're sharing a lot of stuff in the summertime to kind of get you hyped for the release date. They're doing a really good job with getting, like I've said in past videos, really old past videos, about getting the hype train going, being able to get that momentum and get you excited about the game to help with the game sales. They're doing a good job right now. You get it. You're doing really early, you're doing spring stuff right now, and then you're just going to roll into the summer. They're going to pop up some new stuff, and all of a sudden, September 7th is here before you know it, and then it's going to be booming in the market. So I think it's a great release date. That's my comments on the release date specifically. I think the release date's a good choice in September. It's right before all those big games are starting to come out. Unfortunately, it does hurt Tomb Raider a little bit, I think, because Tomb Raider is only 7 days away, and people are going to be playing Spider-Man. That's an open world game. It's going to be it seems like there's going to be a lot to do in this game, and so therefore people's time is going to have to be choosy on where they spend it, and it's going to hurt one of those games, and I think unfortunately it's probably going to hurt Tomb Raider more than Spider-Man. I think Spider-Man is just such an iconic character, and seems like, and we'll go more into my overview of everything overall at the end, but this is truly setting it up like it's going to be a massive blockbuster game that is the game that everybody has been wanting in a Spider-Man game. So unfortunately that might hurt Tomb Raider. That's coming out September 14th. But it's good. It's right before the crazy fall, and it was also a good release date for Tomb Raider as well, hitting before the crazy fall holiday season, and especially now that Red Dead Redemption 2 is coming out this fall, they're trying to get out of the way of there too, and I think that's a smart idea because Red Dead Redemption 2 and Call of Duty are going to own the market in the fall and the winter. So, but great release date. So now getting into the actual stuff covered in the article. So I'm going to cover just a general thing, and then we'll kind of break it down a little bit. So the article by Game Informer revealed that Peter Parker is kind of playing a bigger role in this game. And the studio actually, in Insomniac, the studio that's making the game, we all thought it was Sucker Punch. Well, at least I thought it was Sucker Punch, and a bunch of other news outlets thought it was Sucker Punch as well, but it made sense. But Insomniac, great choice as well. I think they'll do a really good job with this game by their track record with Ratchet and Clank franchise, especially the recent one they put out, which was a great game, great rebirth of that franchise. But anyways, they have said that people find Spider-Man stories more interesting when Peter Parker and Spider-Man's world collide. And so they felt like having Peter Parker as a core element of the game is really important for them to tell the story they want to tell and make the character more interesting and tell a more interesting story, which was super interesting. I think it was a great thing. And he's going to deal with issues like relationships, finances, and just trying to be a decent human being. Now, after reading the article, I'm going to kind of break this down into 3 different segments. And how I want to break this down is I'm going to break it down into the world that they're setting up in this game. I'm going to break down the second part to Peter Parker and kind of that element of the game and the people he relates, the people he spends time with, the relationships, those kinds of things, because those are a big element of this game. And then save the best for last, which is the Spider-Man elements that are really, really good. And excited to share. There's some cool little nuggets in each one of these. So I implore you not to skip through any of these sections, because each one of these have an interesting element that you probably did not know going into it from the trailers, which I don't think ruins the gaming experience because it's something that is established right away in the beginning and you'll know it right away. This stuff that they covered in Game Informer was the very beginning of the game. I'm not going through the exact scenes that they go through, so I don't spoil that for you. Because I don't want that spoiled for any of you guys. I really want to just cover the elements that are there and what are the elements that this game has and why should you be excited or not excited for this game. I'll leave that to the comments below to let me know. But let's get right to it. So the world. So it sets an interesting world for themselves. It takes place where Peter Parker is 23 years old. And he's been Spider-Man for about 8 years now. So he has slowly been chipping away at the evil empire that rules over New York City. So he's been already facing off against a bunch of villains. So he's already faced off against Electro, Scorpion, Rhino, and Vulture. It doesn't say what happened in those battles, but he has faced those kinds of enemies already in some point of time throughout his career as Spider-Man. So potentially these people will come back. I know we saw Shocker in the trailer. I know I saw Rhino and Shocker. I know those people. Yeah, Electro. No, Shocker I saw. No, you face up against Shocker too. I guess I missed that one. I thought I saw Shocker in the trailer. So, and then the other part, during the part in Game Informer, this was a super interesting aspect of it. They got to spin around the world, going around New York City, and they noticed these buildings. And so they asked Game Informer, and they said, well, they first said one of the buildings looked like an Avengers tower. Another building looked like a Wakanda embassy. And then another one looked like Doctor Strange's sanctum. And so they asked them, I said, is Marvel being connected to this at all? And they did say yes. They said that other Marvel characters do exist in this universe that they have created. They have not specifically said if the Avengers from the Ubisoft franchise connect to this. They have not established that at all whatsoever. They've only just said that Marvel characters exist in this universe. They did not say at all whatsoever, and they wouldn't share if you get to interact with any Marvel characters, or these are just places that you see that kind of help establish the world. They wouldn't say anything in regards with that, which makes me think, personally, it would be really cool and exciting to interact with new Marvel characters. The only thing is I hope they do them justice. I hope it's just not a throwaway of, I hope that they spend not just as much time, but they spend a good amount of time on those characters for when if you ever battled with them in a certain mission, that they feel like they're a true fleshed out character, that they spend time creating it. So like the animations are good, the voice acting is good, those kinds of things. I hope they flesh those out if Marvel characters takes place. But the fact that there's a possibility, that is very cool and interesting to see, especially now that the MCU in regards to the movie franchise is so big. This is just another way to connect not core gamers, but casual gamers to a game like this, because they have that establishment of the MCU going into this game, so they will be able to understand. Now, this story stands alone. This has nothing to do with the MCU. This is its own standalone universe and story, but the fact that they're involving those elements is very cool. Now, the mission structure. They have a lot of different kinds of mission structures. So they have a couple ones that are just where you go and you'll talk to a person and it sets up a certain mission. The one that was more interesting that I read in the article was there's missions that while you're traveling around, and I can't remember the quote of the name and I forgot to write it down, unfortunately, but it kind of like is all of a sudden a mission pops up that you can actively do right away without talking to anybody. Like someone's robbing a jewelry shop. So you can go down to you can choose to help them out and go down to the jewelry shop or not. If you choose not to help them, there isn't a downfall from doing that. They haven't stated anything like that so far. So there's no punishment for not helping them out. But if you do that, it turns into its own mission where you're trying to stop them, and maybe they get away in a car and now you have to car chase them, and then there's multiple ways to stop the car. So you can jump on the car and do a quick time event to be able to get them off the car. You could jump in front of the car and use your web shooters to literally stop the car with your body while you're shooting the webs on each side and kind of pulling yourself in and stopping the car behind you. So that also puts an element in the game that they have expressed about you kind of handling the game the way you want to handle it. At the same time, they do offer in each mission bonuses for certain accomplishments that you do extra. So like extra challenges within the core mission that you're doing, which is super cool. And it just allows freedom, yet at the same time, some challenge if you want to challenge yourself to each mission, which is super cool. I think I like those kinds of things in games. I think it offers flexibility, which is important. And I think that flexibility offers good challenge without forcing the challenge upon the player. You can choose if you want to do it or not. Now, finally, I want to mention that I personally have not been to New York City, so I can't speak personally. So I only took it based off what Game Informer said. But they did say that they did a very good job of making a very close representation of what actual New York City looks like. There's actually a financial district, just like New York City. There is a park in the middle, Central Park, just like in New York City. So they do take elements from New York City, and it really makes it feel pretty close to what New York City is like currently. So that is something that, and the other part is they had a funny little blurb. They talked about how they went to Central Park. There was a basketball court. They went in the basketball court, and so they used Spider-Man. They shot his webbing, And then what he did was he shot his webbing, he did a twirl around, which he can do, and then they tried to make a 3-pointer, make the basketball into the hoop. And unfortunately he missed, but he thought that was funny that he could just go into the world, go into the basketball court, shoot the web, and then try to make a basketball. And if you can do that, that's kind of interesting to see what else can you do in the game that's similar to a sandboxy style. That'll be really interesting to see. So that is the world stuff. So now let's get to Peter Parker, and relationships are, like I said earlier, are a big part of this game, and they have established. So in it's about the not only like your relationship to Mary Jane, which we'll talk about in just a second, but your relationships with other characters that come into the fold of the game as well. So Mary Jane, let's talk about her, because obviously in the comics and the movies, she's such an important character to Peter Parker. And so right now, this is where their kind of status is. So they currently have been in a relationship off and on again for a few years. And currently they are broken up and haven't spoke to each other in about over 6 months. Now, the element that's been interesting for Mary Jane is that they know right now they're kind of focused on their careers, and they have kind of changed Mary Jane's career a little bit, kind of gave her what Peter Parker was doing originally. So currently she works at the Daily Bugle, working as an investigative journalist, and she's kind of trying to work her way up. So when we talked about her focusing on her career, that's what she's trying to focus on in being a journalist. It kind of gives a Lois Lane kind of vibe with Mary Jane Watson. I mean, not Mary Jane Watson, with Lois Lane. But I think it can work. It could work. It depends on the story and depends how it works. But she's working as she's working at the Daily Bugle, Peter Parker is working as a scientist. And he's working for a company that Isnomniac would not share. And they said, we won't tell you until you play the game. So that must be a big key element of who he works for, is a big component of the game somewhere, which will be really interesting to see who he works for, because of the other elements of characters that are in this game. Now, the final part for Mary Jane that I do want to mention, that they did mention in this article, is that she is playable. There will be portions of the game where you will play as Mary Jane in certain situations and certain missions, and she actually has her own game mechanics. That will be really interesting to see. I had a feeling that was the case. There was a certain scene in one of the trailers where she kind of was crouching down in a museum. I want to say it's a museum, or it looked like the subway, one of the two. I think it was the second trailer when we got more story elements in there. But for her, it looked like she was playable. So this kind of confirmed that she is a playable character in this game for certain instances and certain missions. And it's kind of nice. They kind of talked about how because they're focused on their careers, she knows that he's Spider-Man, and they kind of play off each other. So she kind of records his successes, but at the same time they're in a relationship, so that they are on and off again on a relationship. So it makes their dynamic really interesting and different, which, after thinking about it for a while, it does make their situation more interesting. And I'm curious on how that story element will be brought up in the game. It makes it a more interesting story because there's conflict there. Now, for the other characters that are around in this game that they did share, Miles Morales, he was in the kind of the end of the second trailer, at the very, very end. If you didn't catch it, if you stopped watching, there's a little snippet right after all the stuff on the trailer. Miles Morales is in this game. He's 15 years old, and he's currently a big fan of Spider-Man. Now, in the comics, he becomes Spider-Man, the new Spider-Man, but at the moment, they haven't shared anything like that before, yet, or at all. He possibly could not be Spider-Man in this game. We never know. But he becomes somehow intertwined with Peter Parker in this game, and that's all they wanted to share on that. Finally, for a couple other elements, Harry Osborn is alive, and he's overseas. He stays in touch with Peter Parker currently, and Norman Osborn, his father, he is currently the mayor and running for re-election, and kind of how he got there was he kind of built up his success from Oscorp and kind of ran that up to politics, and so now he's currently mayor and he's running for re-election. So that might have some key element in this game. And then the final one I want to talk about, we do know about this person. It's Lee. He is a person that we've seen from the demo and all the trailers. He plays Mr. Negative, and he's the one that runs the shelter that Aunt May works at, which is cool. And kind of springing on that, the Game Informer did mention that the story scenes that you do take place in, they're very cinematic. So they kind of compared it to Uncharted, Last of Us, very cinematic type cutscenes where they're not just standing there and talking to each other like a Mass Effect, like a Horizon Zero Dawn. They're actually full-on cutscenes, which he was really impressed by the voice acting and what he saw in the snippet of a scene that was basically saw a more flushed out scene inside the with Aunt May in the shelter with Lee in it. So, but that is Peter Parker. So on to the thing you probably want to talk about the whole time. Like, what the heck did they share about Spider-Man? The actual, like, flying, high flying, all that kind of stuff. And probably the most important thing, the most important element that people always are so critical in these Spider-Man games, which I 100% agree with you. I mean, it's probably the most difficult thing to do in a Spider-Man game is how is the web slinging? There hasn't been a good web slinging personally. Personally, based off my experience in Spider-Man games, the last really good web slinging game was Spider-Man 2, and that's where a lot of people think that as well. And the one thing that they shared about this, which gave me a lot of enthusiasm, saying that they probably have mastered it pretty good. If not, it's going to be probably the best web slinging we've ever seen, is they talked about momentum and how no matter what, Spider-Man always needs to be moving forward. He always has to have momentum going. And he's never going to stop. So like if you accidentally web sling into a building, he's going to use that as momentum, and he's going to launch himself up and run up the building as fast as possible. No matter what, in some way, or if he's going to run into a gate or something like that, he's going to find some way to maneuver around it to keep his momentum going forward, so you never feel like you're stopping when you hit something if you make a mistake, because that's not what Spider-Man would do. He would try to find a way around it to use his momentum to keep moving forward. And I think that's a really good element to think about. So there's not really an opportunity to really screw up. There really is just there's really just going with the flow, and that's kind of what the character, I mean, this is my viewpoint of Spider-Man, of how I've seen him as I've grown up as Spider-Man. Carefree. Like, he's going to be a carefree guy. He's not going to be stressed out about running into that wall there. He's going to adjust and be able to move around it. And they use small web shooters to pull you in, or to be able to pull on certain sides and things like that, to be able to adjust your angles and those kinds of things. The other thing they also mentioned is the different approach, how you approach your web slinging can be different than the next person next to you, because they give you so many options in regards how you want to web sling. There's opportunities where you can dive down to increase your speed to be able to swing higher or faster. There's also opportunities to run on the walls and just kind of parkour on the walls instead of swinging around. So there's multiple opportunities to be able to move around the stages, and momentum is still a big thing about them in the Spider-Man game itself. But in regards, what I've seen and what I read really makes me sound like that this is probably going to be close, if not the best, web slinging in a Spider-Man game we've ever had. I could say it will probably be better than Spider-Man 2, which will be interesting. It makes me really excited to try it out, because it's so picky for a lot of people. But it looks like they might have nailed it down to a T. So now to the combat. So for the combat, they have said that it kind of involves 3 elements for their combat. It's acrobatics, gadgets, and webs. And those are like the core components as fighting a Spider-Man. And now when I mean webs, they've also mentioned the other element of sticking webs to people, or sticking webs to objects, and using those to your advantage. So an example they use is sticking a web to a manhole cover and swinging it around to knock it on somebody, or sticking, and we saw it in we saw in the E3 demo and the gameplay demo. If you haven't checked that out, check it out. But he literally takes a web and he shoots it to the crane, and he flips the crane to make it spin and knock 3 guys out. So using the environment around you is also a big element to this. And the rest of the combat is very similar to the Batman Arkham games. So this is where you're hitting your opponents and you're countering when they're about to hit you. You got the spider sense that actually is visible, that you do see it springing from his head, kind of like in the Arkham games. He had this. It was basically a spider sense for Batman, but you call it bat sense. Bat sense that he could sense the opponent coming to hit him and he could counter them back. And then you kind of, for this one, instead of for Batman Arkham, the Arkham games, you built up your combo of how many times you can hit an opponent. For this one, you just build up a meter and then you can unleash a special on one of the opponents. Now, the cool thing that I didn't expect them to really say about this was that they talked about how Spider-Man is not a killer, and which makes total sense. Spider-Man isn't a killer at all whatsoever. He's a good guy. And so when Spider-Man has opportunities where you think he's going to kill somebody, he actually will not let you. He automatically saves the individual. So in my example, if you're on the roof and you're fighting and you knock a guy flying and he flies off the roof, Spider-Man will automatically web sling him, pull him back on the roof, and stick him to the ground so he doesn't fall to his death. That is so interesting. The fact that they're taking the time to make him feel like this just adds to the element of him being a fleshed out character. That's so impressive. It's just something that you don't think, it's something you think about, but it's like, oh, it's a video game. So of course they're not gonna, but the fact that they thought about that just adds a new element, a new dimension to the game and to the character. And I think that's super impressive. It's something that truly impressed me when I was reading it, and I was quite surprised. But basically, yeah, he'll do things where he automatically will save a person if they are going to fall to their death. And you actually do see that component. I thought it was actually him just hurting the opponent more when I saw in the E3 demo, but you'll see in the E3 demo this last year, in 2017, if you go back to that Sony one, he did kick a guy off the building and he did web him back in and stick him to the ground. So that was proof in the pudding of what we were seeing, and now we have context to it. That's why this article is so interesting. It just brought context of why, and it made you understand more of what is going on in this game. So, and then also you can't beat up people. So if you try to beat up a person, I guess you give them high fives or you take selfies with them, which is kind of funny. I think that's hilarious. So you can't beat up people. You can try, but you're just gonna give them high fives all day long. So the other thing when I mentioned the gadgets, so they talked about 3 different gadgets they currently have, and obviously there's a lot more gadgets in this game, but they only talked about 3 gadgets specifically. So there's a tripwire, a web bomb, and a spider drone. So the tripwire we saw in the E3 demo. This was a stealth type weapon that you stick to the wall, and then if they walk past it, the web will shoot out, grab him, and then pull him to the wall and stick him to the wall. There's also the web bomb, and that's used for a lot of opponents in one area. So you just throw it to the ground. If they step on it, webs will shoot out, and then it will stun the opponents for a certain amount of time so you can get an advantage back in the game. And the final one is the spider drone, which hovers and and blast webs at the opponents, knocking them out, or just knocking them out. So now the other part about kind of your skills is you do earn skill points. So when you do the missions, and when I mentioned you could do there's challenges within those missions, you earn more skill points by doing those. So and then you can improve those skills, improve your web slinging, improve your weaponry, and you can kind of choose how to improve your Spider-Man. So each Spider-Man feels unique to that person. Like any other game that you improve a character, there's going to be components that you can choose to improve or not. Now, one of the final elements that they talked about, which I mentioned really early in this talk, was the suit, and that there was going to be multiple suits, and they're revealing more suits later. Well, they showed Game Informer multiple suits, and apparently you can change out suits at will. They didn't say how you're going to change them, but you can change suits, and each spider suit has its own special ability. And so they revealed at least all the suits' names that they had so far, and it sounded like they had more on the way. But they did not release all the powers, but I'll tell you what they have revealed so far. And again, this really isn't spoiling very much. I guess they're barely scratching the surface of the game. There's so much more of this game that is ready to play once we get there September 7th. So first of all, is the classic suit. So it's the classic, not the white spider. That's the black spider with the blue and red. And this part, his power is causing quad damage. So 4 times the damage. And apparently it glows when it's activated. And basically they said you could basically steamroll your enemies with this suit, with your specialty. Now there were 4 of them, so that's 1. 2 was the Noir suit, and if you have played, I want to say Shattered Dimensions, yes, Shattered Dimensions, Spider-Man's Shattered Dimensions, you know what that Noir suit looks like, and I'll put one on screen. But they have not shared what the special of that power is, so they're leaving that. The other one is Spider-Punk. This one they revealed in the trailer that they just put out that just reveals the date. There wasn't any new content, so I didn't cover that trailer because there wasn't any new cutscenes or anything. It was just about the release date, and we're talking about the release date right now, so it didn't matter to cover that one. But it's on there. Go check it out if you haven't seen it. But basically, it looks like a punk, and he's got a afro with spikes, basically. And his special is that he takes out a guitar and strums it. And when he strums it, a shock wave goes through and knocks down all your enemies. Now, the final one is what they call the wrestling suit. And they did not share what the power is. They don't even share what it looks like. They just said it's the wrestling suit he used before he made his original Spidey suit when he started. And they didn't say what the power was yet. But the final thing that I have to mention because it was just so funny. I was so surprised by this. Was they mentioned when they were talking about skill points, they asked about microtransactions. And if you watch my freeze frame rate newscast that came out today, we talked about microtransactions. And their quote unquote was when they asked them about any kind of microtransactions in this game, they said, hell no. I thought that was absolutely hilarious. And of course, it's the right thing to say. I mean, people don't want to pay microtransactions for a $60 game. Like I've talked about in that. If you want to discuss more about that, check out my freeze frame rate newscast for what I posted today for the week. But I thought it was hilarious that he quotely said hell no about no microtransactions in this game, which makes it for the better. So overall, after looking at all these elements, it seems like Spider-Man fans are gonna get the Spider-Man game that they have been waiting for a long time. It probably will be the best Spider-Man game ever released, or it will compare to Spider-Man 2, which is known as one of the best Spider-Man games of all time. And I think truly they are going in the right direction with this game. And let's just hope they stay on that course, because if they do, they have a hit on their hands. And there's no denying that this game is going to sell like hotcakes. So that is everything that with the new coverage with the new Spider-Man game on PS4. So what did you think about the game and all this kind of coverage that we're getting? What did you find of the cool elements or the most surprising things that you didn't notice from before? And it really makes you go back to that trailer and relook at it and say, now I kind of understand the context of everything. This is why I love these stories all the time. So let me know in the comments below. And if you like this content, check out the other content I have on Freeze Frame Rate and go ahead and give it a like with their thumbs up. Share it with your friends. And if you want to keep up with the content I'm releasing each and every week here on Freeze Frame Rate, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Now, my name is Mitch. Thank you so much for watching. I'm saying see you soon.